According to some estimates, the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has increased 10% in the last 30 years. And the problem may get much worse if we continue to burn large quantities of fossil fuels. Many scientists fear that if we do nothing about this problem, it will lead to global warming.
The tail that wags the dogs is not supportable. And if you go down and look at the scientific literature, we're finding reams of data in new peer-reviewed studies showing the medieval and Roman warming periods as warm or warmer than today without our CO2 emissions. So what's happened here is the whole movement, because now we've gone 16 years without global warming, according to the UN data, and they've now morphed into extreme weather. And we have the absurd spectacle of people claiming that acts of Congress and the United Nations can control the weather and make hurricanes less nasty and make tornadoes less frequent, which, by the way, none of them are showing any trends at all that are unusual.
Okay, Bill Nye, your response.
Well, we start talking about the facts. Those medieval warming period and the Roman warming period, those are just in Europe, and they're not representative.
Both
so let's see if we can agree on a couple things. Do you agree that when I was a kid, or when you were a kid, there was 340 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere?
Sure, carbon dioxide's rising. What's your point?
Okay.
No.
So here's the point, is it's rising extraordinarily fast. That's the difference between the bad old days and now. It's much faster than ever in history. And so
this is trace.
Yeah, let him finish.
Well,
no, please. Let him finish.
It's the rate that's of great concern more than the actual
and what do you put that rate down to, Bill?
Oh, it's human activity. I mean, you go back, this is what I say all the time. So you look in the ice and you find bubbles of trapped gas from 200 years ago, let alone 1,000 years ago. There's nobody running around with a hypodermic needle injecting bubbles of gas in ancient ice cores. I mean, that's the ancient atmosphere in there. And so you can determine the composition of the ancient atmosphere exactly. This medieval warming period is brought up quite often, but it was really a European phenomenon, and it wasn't global.
And what are the biggest factors, the man-made factors, creating the acceleration of CO2 in the atmosphere?
The biggest thing is, when I was 9 years old, the Earth's population changed from 2.999 billion to 3 billion. Now in my lifetime, it's now 7 billion people trying to live the way we live in the developed world. And we're just burning carbon and spewing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere at an extraordinary rate.
Right, so Mark Morano, if there is a massively increased acceleration in CO2 in the atmosphere, at the same time that there's been a bigger than double the sizing of the population of the planet, why would that not be inexorably linked? Explain to me.
Well, CO2 is rising. No one's disputing that. What Bill Nye just did was waste everyone's time explaining that CO2 is rising. The question is, what impact does CO2 have on the weather? What impact does CO2 have on climate change? And that is where you look at the geologic record. We've had warmer periods where it's been with lower.
Millions of Americans who are waking up today in day 3 under the heat dome. This is one of the worst heat waves in recorded history, Ginger told me.
Scary system. This is the strongest hurricane that we have seen in the eastern North Pacific ever on record. A Category 5 right now. We've got wind speeds at 200 miles per hour. This could be, as the National Hurricane Center is saying, a catastrophic event.
Good evening. At a time when so many people are still suffering, right now, tonight, more than 1 month after a monster storm hit a giant population center, today we learn some facts about how this Earth is changing and how fast. For starters, polar ice sheets in Greenland are melting at 5 times the pace of just a few years ago. New research concludes that Antarctica is melting. While it takes a lot of ice to melt to raise ocean levels, they say that is in fact happening, and they believe just an incremental
includes a lot of the new startling evidence linking these extreme weather events around the world to the climate crisis. It's really no longer a legitimate question for doubt or debate. I know there's some people that don't like to hear it put that way, but people around the world are suffering from the consequences of the droughts and the heat waves and the extreme flooding events and the unprecedented windstorms and the fires. It's really gotten to the point now where it's kind of absurd for anybody to say, hey, nothing's going on, what's wrong?